There are people who grow up still holding the small, trembling vows they whispered to themselves long before they understood the weight of time. Promises made in dim bedrooms, in quiet classrooms, in the soft ache of being young, unseen or afraid. Promises that sounded like survival. They don't always remember when these vows were made. Only that they've lived by them for years, sometimes decades, shaping choices, shaping identities, shaping the invisible rules they move through the world with. And so a child's voice becomes an adult's compass. A single moment becomes a lifelong contract, and the past, long gone, continues to speak. This is the quiet psychology of people who carry childhood promises into adulthood, long after the world has changed, and long after they have too. There is a moment, usually small and almost forgettable, when a child first learns the language of internal vows. It rarely comes as a dramatic declaration. More often it forms in the quiet, between the slow tick of a hallway clock, the muffled sound of a parent's disappointment, or the stillness after a lonely afternoon where no one noticed their sadness. A promise begins as a feeling before it becomes a sentence, a tightening in the chest, a quiet decision to protect something tender, a whisper that only the child can hear. Children don't have the vocabulary to name their pain, so they create rules instead. Rules that make the world feel less unpredictable. Rules that turn chaos into something understandable. And so the early promises take shape. I won't burden anyone. I'll be good so no one gets upset. I won't cry. I'll handle everything myself. These are not dramatic oaths. They are survival-level adjustments, tiny emotional algorithms rewritten in real time. And because a child is both deeply sensitive and deeply hopeful, these promises often come from a desire not just to avoid pain, but to earn love, safety, or acceptance. There are children who grow up in loud houses, where anger moves like weather, sudden, forceful, and unpredictable. They learn to stay quiet. Their promise becomes silence, a shield disguised as obedience. There are children who grow up in quiet houses where affection is scarce and emotions are inconvenient. They learn to glow softly, to take up less space. Their promise becomes invisibility. There are children who grow up watching the adults they love crumble under the weight of their own unhealed stories. They learn to step in early, to become small protectors. Their promise becomes responsibility. Most don't realize they're making these vows. They simply respond to the environment, shaping their identities the way vines shape themselves around whatever structure they find. Childhood promises are born from instinct, an emotional reflex towards survival, meaning, and coherence. If you watch closely, you can see the promise forming in real time. A child hears their parent argue in the next room. Their shoulders lift, their breath slows. They learn to listen for danger. A quiet thought emerges. If I'm good, maybe things won't get worse. The promise seals itself somewhere out of sight, but not out of influence. Or maybe a child brings home something they're proud of, a drawing, a story, a small accomplishment, and the moment is brushed aside, unnoticed. A small ache appears, and the promise follows. Don't expect too much from anyone. There are thousands of variations, but the structure is always the same. A moment of emotional need met with absence, overwhelm, or unpredictability, followed by a vow that feels like protection. These promises are never neutral. They carry the emotional fingerprints of the environments that created them. A promise made in fear tastes different than one made in loneliness. A promise made to keep peace carries a different weight than one made to earn love. but all of them share one thing. They feel true. They feel necessary. They feel like the only solution available to a small human trying to make sense of a big world. And so the child carries the promise the way someone might carry a talisman. Guarded, precious, worn smooth by repetition, through school, through friendships, through the early shaping of self. It becomes part of their inner vocabulary, a quiet rule that is rarely questioned because it has always been there. What no one tells them is that these promises are time-sensitive. They are designed for a world that no longer exists by the time adulthood arrives. But children cannot see that far ahead. They are only trying to survive the moment they are in. And so the promise, once protective, becomes a shadow that follows them long after the danger has passed. A childhood vow is not just a sentence. It is an emotional inheritance, a whispered contract, a shield that becomes a pattern. And before an adult even realizes it, the promise begins shaping their life from beneath the surface, guiding choices, defining boundaries, and painting the world with memories they can no longer consciously remember. Every promise carried from childhood begins somewhere, rooted in a specific emotional climate that shapes how a young mind understands the world. A child does not create vows in isolation. They arise from patterns repeated quietly in the background of daily life, long before anyone realizes how deeply these moments have imprinted themselves. To understand the vow, you must understand the soil it grew from. For many, these internal promises begin in the subtle spaces between a parent's intentions and a child's interpretations. A parent may be loving, yet stressed, caring yet inconsistent, present yet emotionally distant. A child absorbs these contradictions instinctively, crafting internal rules that make sense of what they cannot fully articulate. When affection comes sporadically, they may learn to earn it. When emotions are ignored, they may learn to mute them. When family stability depends on their behavior, they may learn to become the responsible one. Some children grow up in homes that are not unsafe, yet are quietly overwhelming. A household where perfection is praised more than presence, where achievement feels like the currency of belonging, where love is offered but subtly tied to performance. In these environments, a child may form the promise, "If I succeed, I will be valued. If I falter, I will lose everything." It becomes a vow of excellence, driven not from ambition, but from fear of disappointing the world around them. Others grow up in the opposite landscape, chaotic, unpredictable, emotionally ungrounded. Their promises come from necessity. They learn to anticipate moods, to manage conflicts, to become small guardians of fragile adults. The vow sounds like responsibility, but underneath is a deeper truth. If I let go, things will fall apart. These children become adults who cannot rest, who feel guilty when they prioritize themselves, who apologize even when they are not wrong. Then there are the children whose promises come from loneliness. Loneliness is not always the absence of people. Sometimes it is the absence of being understood. A child who feels emotionally unseen may craft a vow around self-sufficiency. They learn early that depending on others leads to disappointment. And so they grow into adults who carry independence like armor, capable, composed, but quietly longing for someone who can understand the weight they carry without needing it explained. Attachment shapes these promises too. A child with an anxious attachment may vow to hold on tightly, believing that closeness is fragile. A child with avoidant attachment may vow to step back, believing that emotional distance is safer than vulnerability. A child with disorganized attachment may live between both, pulled toward connection, but terrified by it, Each promise mirrors the emotional blueprint of their early bonds. Even generational patterns play a role. Children often absorb not just their parents' behavior, but the atmospheres surrounding them. Unspoken grief, financial stress, unhealed trauma passed across years. They learn what pain looks like and what triggers exist. Their promises become quiet strategies to avoid repeating what they witnessed. I won't be like them. I will fix what they could not. I will hold the family together. These vows are heavy, but to a child they feel noble. The origin of childhood promises is rarely a single event. More often, it is accumulation. 1,000 tiny impressions that form a single emotional truth. A child notices the tone before they understand the words. They understand the tension before they understand the conflict. They absorb the atmosphere long before they can describe it. Promises form in the spaces where a child tries to make sense of experiences too large for their age. And even after leaving those early environments, the internal vows persist, because the child who created them never truly had the chance to revisit or release them. The promise stays sealed in the emotional version of amber, preserved, rigid, untouched. Only later, as adults, do they begin to sense that something in their inner life does not match the world they now live in. But by then, the promise has already become part of who they believe they must be. The human brain remembers childhood in ways that are both stunningly brilliant and quietly complicated. Not every memory becomes a story. Not every experience becomes a picture. But nearly every emotional pattern becomes a blueprint, an implicit memory stored deep within the body, the nervous system, and the unconscious mind. This is how childhood promises survive, not through conscious recollection, but through emotional repetition. A young brain is still forming pathways that determine how it interprets safety, connection, and self-worth. When something feels overwhelming, the body creates mechanisms to cope. When something feels predictable, it becomes familiar. Over time, the familiar begins to feel true, regardless of whether it was healthy. The brain uses two main systems to store these early experiences: explicit memory and implicit memory. Explicit memory holds the stories we can tell, the events we can recall, the details we can describe. But implicit memory holds the emotional lessons, the reactions that appear without thought, the instincts that activate without permission. Childhood promises live in the implicit realm. They are the habits of the heart rather than the facts of the past. When a child makes an internal vow, even unconsciously, it leaves a physiological trace. The brain learns to protect itself through consistency. If silence kept them safe, the nervous system learns to freeze. If perfection earned approval, the brain rewards striving. If self-sufficiency prevented disappointment, the brain discourages vulnerability. Over time, these responses become automatic. The amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, plays a significant role. It learns what danger feels like and responds quickly to anything that resembles it, even years later. This is why an adult who once vowed to avoid conflict may feel their chest tighten at the slightest tension, or why someone who learned not to rely on others may feel uneasy when intimacy deepens. The brain remembers emotional patterns long after the conscious mind forgets the story behind them. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and decision-making, matures much later than the emotional centers. This developmental gap means children make promises based on emotion, not logic. And because these promises form before the brain is fully developed, they become embedded as foundational truths rather than optional beliefs. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt, plays an interesting role. It allows children to survive difficult environments by adjusting instantly. But it also allows these adjustments to calcify, shaping adulthood in ways that feel fixed even when they no longer serve a purpose. A childhood vow becomes the default setting. Even the body remembers. Muscles tighten, breath shortens, posture shifts. The nervous system memorizes survival strategies, storing them as somatic imprints. That is why some adults feel a vague sense of urgency, guilt, or fear without understanding why. The body is still following the promise. The child's logic is still in command, whispering rules through sensations rather than words. This is not a flaw. It is a testament to how deeply the mind protects itself. Childhood promises endure because they once served an essential function. They helped create predictability in uncertain environments. They minimized emotional wounds. They offered structure when the world felt unsteady. But the brain does not automatically update these vows with time. It must recognize safety before it can release them. Until then, the childhood promise remains active, influencing decisions, relationships, and inner narratives. It becomes a quiet blueprint that adulthood repeats, often without realizing the source. This is why people can feel stuck, confused, or patterned in familiar ways despite conscious efforts to change. The brain isn't resisting growth. It is honoring a contract created long ago, a promise meant to protect, a promise once needed, a promise the body still believes is necessary. As adulthood unfolds, the promises made in childhood begin to conflict with the life a person is trying to build. This internal tension creates a quiet war, one that is rarely visible to others, but deeply felt within. A battle between old protections and new desires, between the person someone needed to be and the person they now wish to become. The conflict is subtle at first. It appears in hesitation, in second thoughts, in invisible barriers that rise without warning. Someone who once vowed to be self-reliant may struggle with intimacy, wanting closeness, but fearing the vulnerability it requires. Someone who promised to be perfect may feel pressure rise like a tide anytime they slow down or rest. Someone who vowed to stay quiet may freeze during moments that require honesty. These moments seem irrational to the adult, but they make perfect sense to the child who made the promise. This is the tension of the hidden war. Two versions of the self fighting for control. The child, shaped by fear and survival, still wants safety. The adult, shaped by longing and growth, wants freedom. Many people don't realize this conflict is happening. They assume their reactions are personality traits rather than inherited defense strategies. They believe their patterns reflect who they are, not who they needed to be. And so the war continues quietly, expressed through anxiety, avoidance, overthinking, or chronic responsibility. The hidden war often shows up in relationships. Someone may desire connection, yet feel overwhelmed when it arrives. They may crave emotional intimacy, but panic when they sense expectations. Or they may enter relationships trying to save others the way they once saved their family. These dynamics are not about the people they meet. They are about the promises they still carry. The conflict also appears in careers. A person who vowed to be exceptional may burn out chasing unrealistic standards. A person who promised to stay invisible may avoid opportunities that require stepping into the spotlight. A person who vowed not to need help may struggle to collaborate or delegate. Their adult ambitions clash with their childhood survival rules, and the tension becomes exhausting. The most difficult part is that both sides believe they are protecting the person. The child part fears change, believing that altering the promise means risking danger. The adult part longs for growth, believing that honoring the old vow means sacrificing authenticity. Neither side is wrong. They are simply incomplete without each other. The hidden war also reveals itself through self-sabotage, not as failure, but as protection disguised as discomfort. If a childhood promise warned against attention, success may trigger anxiety. If a vow discouraged vulnerability, love may feel frightening. If a promise prioritized others' needs, rest may feel selfish. The sabotage is not malicious. It is a defense against violating a long-held contract. This conflict can last years. Some feel it as a heaviness they cannot name. Others feel it as frustration, the sense that no matter how much they change externally, something internal remains rigid. A person may ask, "Why am I like this?" without realizing that the answer lies in a promise made decades ago. The hidden war does not mean someone is broken. It means they are divided. It means two truths coexist. The truth that once protected them, and the truth that now restrains them. And the war continues until one realization finally arrives. The understanding that the promise, once sacred, may no longer be necessary. There comes a moment, often unexpected, when the childhood promise can no longer hold the weight of an adult life. It doesn't always happen dramatically. Sometimes it arrives as exhaustion, an emotional tiredness that settles into the bones. Sometimes it appears in the form of a gentle heartbreak, or a small failure, or a moment of tenderness that catches someone off guard. Whatever form it takes, it becomes the beginning of the unraveling. This is the turning point, the moment where the old vow, once sturdy, begins to crack. For many, the breaking point appears when the internal conflict becomes too heavy to carry. A person may find themselves unable to maintain the perfection they once used as armor, or they may realize that self-sufficiency has left them isolated, or they may feel a deep, quiet sadness that the life they've built does not match the life they want. The promise, instead of protecting them, begins to hurt. Sometimes the shift happens in relationships. A friend, partner, or even a stranger offers a moment of safety that feels unfamiliar. A gentle question, a patient silence, a presence that does not demand performance, and something small softens inside. The promise begins to feel restrictive, too tight for the person they have become. Other times, it happens through loss, losing a job, losing a relationship, losing an identity. These moments pull away the structures that once allowed the old promise to function. Without the familiar context, the vow is exposed. A person sees, sometimes for the first time, how deeply that childhood rule has shaped their choices. The breaking point can also come through self-recognition, a moment where someone sees their reflection, emotional or literal, and notices the disconnect. They realize they have lived by rules created by a much younger version of themselves, and something inside whispers, "This is no longer mine." The turning point is not about strength or growth, it is about awareness. A person finally witnesses the cost of the promise. They notice the loneliness hidden behind independence, the anxiety hidden behind achievement, the resentment hidden behind caretaking, the longing hidden behind emotional distance. The truth becomes visible, and visibility begins the shift. But the breaking is not clean. This is the moment where resistance intensifies. The child self fears what will happen if the promise is released. It warns, it tenses, it fights to maintain the familiar structure. But even through the fear, the cracks widen. The adult self recognizes that the old vow cannot coexist with the life they hope to build. There is often sadness in this moment, not because the promise was wrong, but because it was once necessary. A person may mourn the child who had to make it. They may grieve the years spent living by a rule meant to protect them from pain that no longer exists. The grief is quiet, but profound. A recognition that the promise once served them and now restrains them. The turning point is not a single moment, but a slow realization that unfolds over time. Each small insight, each emotional shift, each change in perspective becomes another fracture in the old vow. And eventually, the promise that once held so much power becomes something fragile, something ready to be released. When the childhood promise begins to dissolve, life opens in subtle but meaningful ways. It doesn't happen all at once. There is no dramatic transformation. Instead, a quiet spaciousness appears, like light entering a room through the smallest crack. This is the beginning of integration, the process of learning to live without the old oath. Integration is not the same as healing. Healing implies an end, a conclusion. Integration is ongoing, a gentle acknowledging, a slow unfolding, a return to oneself without force. It begins when someone recognizes that the promise was not a flaw, but a response, a necessary adaptation, a child's attempt to create order in a world that felt too big. As the promise loosens, the adult self begins to reclaim choices that were once unavailable. Someone who vowed to be silent may find their voice trembling but present. Someone who vowed to be perfect may allow a small mistake without self-criticism. Someone who vowed to stay self-reliant may ask for help in a tentative whisper. These moments seem small, but internally they feel seismic. Each small act becomes a renegotiation of identity. The nervous system adjusts too, slowly, carefully. A body that once tensed at vulnerability learns to relax. A heart that once raced at emotional closeness learns to slow. A mind that once feared disappointment learns to tolerate unpredictability. Integration happens through the body as much as through thought. There is often confusion in this stage. A person may feel unfamiliar to themselves. Without the promise guiding their decisions, they may wonder who they are without the rule that once defined them. This uncertainty is not regression. It is growth in disguise. The space left by the promise allows new patterns to form, ones chosen, not inherited. Gentleness becomes essential here. The adult self learns to hold the child self with curiosity rather than judgment. The old vow is not discarded, it is understood. A person realizes that the promise was an attempt at safety. Instead of rejecting it, they honor its intention. And in honoring it, the vow loses its rigidity. Integration also appears in relationships. Someone begins to notice the difference between connection that demands performance and connection that offers presence. They learn to identify the subtle tug of the old promise, how it urges them to please, to withdraw, to fix, to hide. But now they have the awareness to pause, to choose differently. Sometimes they still follow the old pattern, but even then, something within them recognizes the choice. Awareness itself becomes freedom. This stage is quiet, almost imperceptible. It shows up in the way someone sits, the way they breathe, the way they answer questions, the way they allow silence. They begin to trust themselves in ways they never could as a child. And the more they trust themselves, the less the old promise is needed. Integration does not erase the past. It weaves the past into a new understanding. The childhood vow becomes a story rather than a command. a memory rather than a rule, a piece of history rather than a weight. Over time, the person grows into a version of themselves that feels more authentic, more aligned, more spacious. They are no longer living according to a contract written by a fearful child. They are creating a new way of being, one that allows softness, presence, and emotional truth. The oath, once rigid, becomes a whisper, still part of them, but no longer in control. Even after a childhood promise is released, something remains. Not the weight of the vow, but its echo, the quiet reminder of who someone once was and how far they have traveled. This echo is not a burden. It is a trace of history, a soft imprint of the path that shaped them. The echo appears in moments of vulnerability. When life becomes uncertain, the old promise may whisper again, not as a command, but as a memory. Stay quiet. Be perfect. Handle it alone. These whispers do not carry the same authority they once did, but they remind the person of the child they once were, the child who tried so hard to protect themselves with the only tools they had. The echo also appears in moments of tenderness, when someone experiences genuine care, when they feel seen without effort. They may sense a bittersweet awareness. They realize how long they lived without this softness, how deeply the old promise shaped their understanding of love, safety, and belonging. The echo becomes a gentle remembrance, not of pain, but of resilience. There are days when the echo feels distant, like a story from another lifetime. And there are days when it feels closer, like a familiar shadow. This fluctuation is natural. Healing is not linear. Integration is not permanent stillness. The echo remains as a subtle compass, reminding the person of the patterns they once followed and the choices they now have the power to make differently. The echo is also an emotional artifact. It carries the textures of past rooms, past voices, past atmospheres. It reminds someone of the home they grew from, the people who shaped them, the silence they endured, the expectations they internalized. It does not ask them to return. It simply honors where they have been. Over time, the echo becomes less about survival and more about meaning. The promise that once confined becomes a reference point for understanding the self. The person can look at their life with clarity. They see the child who made the vow, the adult who carried it, and the human being who eventually outgrew it. This awareness brings depth, compassion, a quiet wisdom that cannot be learned through ease. The echo also shapes how someone moves through the world. They may become more sensitive to the unspoken vows others carry, more patient with the defenses people use, more compassionate toward the hidden wars within other hearts. The echo allows them to see the resilience beneath someone else's rigidity, the fear beneath someone's distance, the longing beneath someone's perfectionism. It teaches them to witness others the way they have learned to witness themselves. The final stage of the journey is not forgetting the promise. It is recognizing that the promise no longer defines them. It is understanding that the vow was a bridge, necessary once, but not forever. The echo becomes a soft hum in the background, a part of the emotional landscape, but not the guiding force. And as someone steps fully into their adulthood, they learn to live with a new kind of quiet. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of inner spaciousness. A calm that comes not from fear, but from understanding. They become someone who moves with more intentionality, more presence, more truth. And the echo remains, not as an anchor, but as a reminder that even the smallest promises made in childhood have the power to shape a life, and that letting them go is its own form of growth. its own kind of liberation, its own quiet miracle.